Helping family is a beautiful thing. But the moment someone starts treating your kindness as a guaranteed income rather than a gift, the dynamic has become unhealthy. This story teaches several important life lessons. How do you rebuild boundaries with a family that's always treated you like an ATM? I spent hundreds of dollars on gifts for my nieces and nephews, but their mom told me I was embarrassing for not spending more. So I decided to cut them off for good. Now they're begging me to stop. Ever since I was little, my parents drilled it into me that when I grew up, I'd need to take care of the family. So my dream of making money always came with the idea of showering them in gifts and love. I studied hard, paid more than half of the rent as a teenager, and still never got a real thank you from my parents. I knew something was wrong, but I craved their approval so much that I pushed it to the back of my mind. Fast forward to now. I'm 28, and last Thanksgiving I actually felt good for the first time in years because I could buy gifts for everyone. My parents, my sister Emma, her husband Joe, and their 3 kids. I even got extras so the kids wouldn't fight and some spares in case people brought plus ones. I convinced myself this was how things should feel. Then reality hit. I showed up at my parents' house with my car full of presents. I knocked, my mom opened the door, and instead of a hug or even a hi, she said, "We think it's better if you don't join us this year." I thought she was joking. I even started to laugh. Then Emma shouted from the living room, "This isn't a gathering for cheapskates. You've become a real drag lately." I just stood there, confused, furious, humiliated. My dad hovered in the background, saying nothing. Mom looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her. Emma looked pleased. I nodded slowly and said, "If that's how everyone feels, okay." Then turned around and went to sit in my car, surrounded by bags of presents nobody wanted. They called me a cheapskate, a drag. I had this awful feeling that Emma was behind it, but I couldn't figure out why. So I asked myself the same thing I always ask when I'm in these situations. If I were my own brother-in-law, would I appreciate me immediately? My head flooded with memories of helping them, paying for the kids' activities, chipping in when money was tight, even covering part of their down payment when they bought their house. The answer was clear. Hell yeah, I'd appreciate me. That's when I let myself get really angry. I marched back up to the front door. They were still there, my parents whispering, surprised I hadn't driven away, and Emma sprawled on the couch, scrolling TikTok with the volume on full blast. I walked in and said, "What's going on? Why am I suddenly not welcome?" She smirked without even looking up. "You think we haven't noticed you've been slacking lately? Even the kids barely get anything from you anymore." Honestly, I wanted her to slap me more than hear her say that. I raised my voice. "I have hundreds of dollars worth of presents for your kids sitting in my car right now." She cut me off. "I don't want to hear it. A few years ago when they were born, you did way more. It's honestly embarrassing." I turned to my parents, expecting support. Mom gave me an awkward half smile and said, "She's got a point, honey. You just leased that new truck. You found money for that." "The truck is financed," I replied. "And even if I'd paid cash, why does that make me responsible for Emma's family? They're not my kids." "You make twice what Joe does," Emma said, lounging like we were talking about the weather. "We're family. Family helps each other." I looked at Joe, sitting in the corner saying nothing. "So," I said, "because I was generous in the past, I'm now obligated to keep giving forever? If I don't, I'm a cheapskate?" Emma shrugged. "If that's how you want to see it." That was my breaking point. I stepped back, shook my head, and said, "You're right. I don't belong here." I looked at my parents. "Enjoy your Thanksgiving." Then I walked out without waiting for a reply. The drive home was tense. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I almost wanted to believe I was the villain, that there was no way I could suddenly be exiled from the family just for not giving enough. When I got home, I sat in the driveway, staring at the gifts I'd spent hours wrapping. They didn't feel good anymore. They felt sickening. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This had been building for years. Thanksgiving was just the breaking point. Emma had always leaned on me financially. When she and Joe first married, they struggled. Joe bounced between jobs. Emma's part-time pay barely covered basics. I stepped in thinking it was temporary. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. But temporary turned into years. I'd made it too easy for Emma to depend on me. I think I made a monster. And that night was my wake-up call. I realized there was only one solution. No more rescuing Emma and Joe. No more endless gifts to cover their financial irresponsibility. I was done. If they wanted their kids to have what I'd been giving them, they could figure it out themselves. It wasn't easy. Cutting off my sister meant risking my relationships with her kids, and even my parents. But I couldn't keep being treated like an ATM instead of a brother and an uncle. I didn't reach out, and they didn't either. Christmas came and went, then New Year's. I spent the holidays alone for the first time in forever. I didn't expect calls, but it still felt strange when the clock struck midnight and my phone stayed silent. Mid-January, things shifted. Joe texted me out of the blue. "I'm sorry about Thanksgiving. I don't agree with what happened. Emma won't listen to me, but I thought you should know. I appreciated that someone in the family saw the injustice, but Joe had had sat there silently that night. His apology felt too little, too late, I replied. Thanks for saying that, Joe, but this isn't something I can just brush off. He didn't push it further, which was fine by me. Then in early February, Emma showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was in the middle of a video call, and she started knocking aggressively. I tried ignoring it, but she kept going. When I finally opened the door, she pushed past me and said, "We need to talk." I crossed my arms. "About what?" "You need to stop this childish behavior and start helping again," she snapped. I laughed. "Helping? You mean financing your life?" "I told you I'm done," she glared. "You're the one with money to spare. Do you know how hard it's been for us since you decided to throw this tantrum? The kids barely have what they need. Joe's struggling to keep everything together. We can't manage without you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you even listening to yourself? You're a grown woman with a husband and children. If you need more money, get better jobs. It's not my responsibility to solve your problems. You've said yourself, I was helping before. Why now am I stingy? Stingy, I repeated. Let's talk about how you lied to our parents about me, turned them against me, and banned me from Thanksgiving because I wasn't generous enough with your kids. And now you're here asking for more? That's some nerve. She tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand. We're done here. I'm not giving you another penny. I don't want to hear from you again until you learn how to act like an adult. She stormed out. I thought that was the end. I figured she'd sulk, maybe complain to my parents, but eventually realized I wasn't backing down. I was wrong. 2 days later, an unknown number called. I usually don't answer those, but something made me pick up. "Hello, is this Alex?" a woman asked. "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Patricia Wilson. I'm an attorney. I represent a client who's raised concerns about certain financial matters involving your family. Do you have a moment to discuss this?" An attorney? What financial matters? She couldn't go into specifics over the phone, but it had to do with the money I'd given to Emma and her family. I agreed to meet her, curiosity winning out. The next day, she dropped the bomb as soon as I walked into her office. "My client is Joe," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. I stared at her. "Joe? Why would he need a lawyer?" Patricia explained that Joe believed Emma had been misusing the money I'd sent them over the years. He had evidence that she was hiding funds from both of us. She opened the folder. Bank statements, receipts, screenshots of messages. Emma had been diverting the money I thought was going to bills and the kids into a separate account of her own. Transactions showed shopping sprees, spa weekends, and even a weekend getaway with someone named Jen that Joe knew nothing about. My stomach dropped. I'd been helping all this time, and the money was never really going to them. I asked if Joe had solid proof. Patricia pushed the folder closer. I flipped through it, seeing transfers from my account into their joint account, then withdrawals into Emma's separate account. The pattern was clear. I was furious, betrayed, and ashamed I hadn't seen it earlier. I asked what Joe was planning to do. Patricia said he was weighing his options, wants to protect himself and the kids, and might file for separation if things escalated. That hit me hard. Joe had always seemed like the quiet, loyal type, the one who would stick with Emma no matter what. If he was even considering leaving, it had to be really bad. That night, I called him. We talked for a while. He admitted he should have said something at Thanksgiving, and that he'd been afraid to stand up to Emma. Now he was realizing the kids deserved better. So did I. I told him I was glad he reached out. He said he was truly sorry about what happened at my parents' house, and that I didn't deserve any of it. We agreed I'd support him and the kids if they needed it, but not Emma. A few weeks later, Joe texted that they were leaving that weekend. He and the kids were moving across state while Emma was supposedly visiting a friend, which I now assumed was another shopping spree. He didn't want her to know where they were going until he had legal protection in place. He asked if I could help with moving expenses and getting them set up. I said, "Say no more. I've got you covered." I helped Joe and the kids relocate, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an ATM. I felt like I was finally supporting something real. Emma went ballistic. When she came home to find them gone, she called me, screaming that I'd turned Joe against her and destroyed her family. I let her rant for a minute, then I calmly said, "Maybe if you spent less time shopping and more time being a mother and a wife, that wouldn't have happened. But good luck with that," and hung up. Joe is doing well now. He's found a decent job. The kids are adjusting to their new school, and he's starting to regain his confidence. As for Emma, I hear she's still blaming everyone but herself. My parents eventually learned the whole story and apologized profusely for taking her side at Thanksgiving. But honestly, I'm just glad I'm free of the guilt and obligation. Some family relationships are worth saving. Others just drain you until there's nothing left. Subscribe, because sometimes cutting people off is the healthiest thing you can do.